Today we're taking a deep dive into the classic Stanley Kubrick film, The Shining, based on the Stephen King novel by the same name. Welcome everyone, this is Mike from FearShop.com. Today, deep dive into the classic Stanley Kubrick film, The Shining. We're going to really dig into this one. You're going to find out a lot about this movie and hopefully a lot of things you didn't know. Before we get into it, make sure you're smashing that like button for me. You're going to love this video, so you might as well just start hitting that like button now. Make sure you're leaving your comments. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Also, hit that bell to set up notifications so you know when the next video drops. We have a bunch of different playlists and video types that we're doing. Alright, so let's get into this classic masterpiece that is The Shining. Widely considered one of the greatest horror films of all time. It's, also widely criticized as being a horrible adaptation of the novel itself. Stephen King has, made no qualms about it that he's not a huge fan of this by any means. So The Shining is a 1980 psychological horror film produced and directed by Stanley Kubrick, co-written with novelist Diane Johnson. It's based on Stephen King's 1977 novel of the same name. It stars Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, Scatman Crothers, and Danny Lloyd. The film's central character is Jack Torrance, played by Nicholson. He's an inspiring writer and recovering alcoholic who accepts his position as the off-season caretaker of the isolated historic Overlook Hotel in the Colorado Rockies. So basically, Jack and his family are wintering over at this place. So Danny possesses what's called the Shining, this psychic ability that enables him to see into the hotel's horrific past. The hotel cook, Dick Halloran, played by Crothers, also has this ability and is able to communicate with Danny telepathically. The hotel has a previous winter caretaker who went insane and killed his family and himself. After a winter storm leaves the Torrances snowbound, Jack's sanity starts to deteriorate. And, the rest is history. The film was released in the United States on May 23rd, 1980, United Kingdom on October 2nd of 80 by Warner Brothers. And there's several versions of the theatrical release, each of which was cut shorter than the one preceding, and about 27 minutes in total were cut. Reactions to the film at the time of its release were mixed. Again, Stephen King criticized it heavily due to its deviations from the novel. Critical opinion has become more favorable and it's become a staple of pop culture. In 2018, the film was selected for preservation into the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. A sequel, Dr. Sleep, was released last year in November in 2019 in the US and then on Halloween Day in Europe. So, getting back to the film not being a faithful adaptation to the novel. Stephen King, easy for me to say, Stephen King was quite disappointed in the film. He admitted that Kubrick's visuals were stunning. He said that the film was surface and not substance. He often described the film as a fancy car without an engine. So Stanley Kubrick believed that the ghost stories were fundamental hopeful because they implied that there's life after death. He did not believe in hell and was a very optimistic person. There are reports of conversations between Kubrick and King and how they differed on how the film should play out. Obviously, King wanted Kubrick to follow the book word for word, but Kubrick wanted to take some liberties. In one of the many deviations from the novel, Kubrick's movie depicts Jack not as a good man corrupted by an evil hotel, but as a bad man whose inner evil is brought to the surface when he returns to the literal demons that's always haunted him. Prior to going to the hotel, he had dislocated his son's shoulder in a fit of alcoholic rage. He was condescending to his wife. He could be considered to be in a good mood when he was merely passive-aggressive instead of aggressive. The Shining was eventually readapted as a 1997 miniseries that followed Stephen King's book more closely because of his dissatisfaction with Kubrick's adaptation. However, Kubrick owned the rights to the 1980 adaptation, so in order for King to get the right to readapt his own book into the miniseries, Kubrick required that he sign a legally binding contract that forced King to no longer be able to bring up the frequent public criticism of Kubrick's film, save for the sole commentary that he was disappointed with Jack Nicholson's portrayal of Jack Torrance, as though he had been insane before his arrival at the Overlook Hotel. So Kubrick considered Robert De Niro and Robin Williams for the role of Jack Torrance, but decided against them. He did not think De Niro would suit the role after watching his performance in Taxi Driver, as he deemed De Niro not psychotic enough for the role. He did not think that Williams would suit the role after watching his performance on Mork and Mindy. He deemed him too psychotic for the role. According to King, Kubrick also briefly considered Harrison Ford. That's a hell of a list of names. So Stephen King tried to talk Kubrick out of casting Jack Nicholson in the lead. He suggested either Michael Moriarty or Jon Voight. King had felt that watching either of these normal-looking men gradually descend into madness would have immensely improved the dramatic thrust of the storyline. Much like the casting of the character Jack, Stephen King also disliked the casting of Shelley Duvall as Wendy. King saw Wendy as being a blonde former cheerleader type who never had to deal with any true problems in her life, making her experience in the Overlook all the more terrifying. He felt that Duvall was too emotionally vulnerable. She already appeared to have gone a lot in her life, basically the exact opposite of how he pictured the character. Kubrick's first choice to play Danny Torrance was Cary Guthrie, the young boy from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Very good movie. Guffey's parents apparently turned down the offer due to the film's subject matter. King has also never understood why people find this movie so scary. Prior to hiring Diane Johnson as his writing partner, Kubrick rejected a screenplay written by King. King's script was a much more literal adaptation of the novel, much more traditional horror film, basically much more traditional than what Kubrick ultimately would make. He was considering hiring Johnson because he admired her novel The Shadow Knows, but when he found out that she was a doctor of Gothic studies, he became convinced she was the right person for the job. According to Shelley Duvall, the infamous Here's Johnny scene took 3 days to film and the use of 60 doors. To get Nicholson into the right agitated mood, he was fed only cheese sandwiches for 2 weeks, which he hates. There were so many changes to the script during shooting that Jack Nicholson claimed he stopped reading it. He would read only the new pages that were given to him each day. Angelica Houston lived with Jack Nicholson during the time of the shooting. She recalled that due to the long hours on the set and Kubrick's trademark style of repetitive takes, Nicholson would often return from a day's shooting, walk straight to the bed, collapse, and would immediately fall asleep. Kubrick was known for his compulsiveness and numerous retakes. He got the difficult shot of blood pouring from the elevators in only 3 takes. This would be remarkable if it weren't for the fact that the shot took 9 days to set up. Every time the doors opened, the blood poured out, Kubrick would say, "Doesn't look like blood." In the end, the shot took approximately a year to get right. The shot of the tennis ball rolling to Danny's toys took 50 takes to get right. There's a great deal of confusion regarding this film and the number of retakes of certain scenes. According to the Guinness Book of World Records, the scene where Wendy's backing up the stairs swinging a baseball bat was shot 127 times, which is the record for the most takes of a single scene. However, both Steadicam operator Garrett Brown and assistant director Gordon Stainforth said this is inaccurate. The scene was shot about 35 to 45 times. Shelley Duvall suffered from nervous exhaustion throughout filming, including physical illness and hair loss. As he lived in England, Kubrick was not at all familiar with the "Here's Johnny" line from The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. Nicholson improvised that. He very nearly didn't use it. Despite Kubrick's fierce demands on everyone, Jack Nicholson admitted to having a good working relationship with him. It was with Shelley Duvall that he was a completely different director. He allegedly picked on her more than anyone else, as seen in the documentary, Making The Shining and Stanley Kubrick, A Life in Pictures. He'd really lose his temper with her, even going so far as to say she was wasting the time of everyone on the set. She later reflected on it and was probably pushing her to her limits to get the best out of her, and that she wouldn't trade the experience for anything, but it was something she never wished to repeat. During filming, Kubrick made the cast watch Eraserhead from 1977 and Rosemary's Baby from 1968 and The Exorcist from 1973 to put him in the right frame of mind. Stephen King got the idea for the book while his family was staying at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. They were the last guests before it shut down for a winter. He saw a group of nuns leaving a hotel, and it got him thinking that the place had suddenly become godless. The King family stayed in room 217, the haunted room in the novel, but room 237 in the film. Danny Torrance's imaginary friend Tony isn't given much of an explanation in the 1980 film. However, in the book, Tony's actually Danny's adult self speaking to him from the future. In the book, Danny's middle name is Anthony, or Tony for short. Furthermore, in the book, Tony is a benevolent imaginary friend who acts as a sword of conscience, as well as a sixth sense and a companion for Danny, since he doesn't have many friends at school. Tony's also fully visible to Danny as a person. In the film, Tony's invisible and is only a high-pitched voice which speaks to Danny's parents through Danny himself. In the film, Tony often appears almost evil or a sign that Danny's mentally disturbed, often making Danny pass out or scaring his mother, showing graphic images and eventually full-on possessing Danny and making him write Red Rum in the Hotel with Wendy Torrance's lipstick. Although a key point in the novel, the hotel boiler is only mentioned once in the film. Along with Bound for Glory in 1976, Marathon Man in the same year, and Rocky in the same year, this was one of the scariest films to use the recently developed Steadicam. The film was shot in the same film studio that was used for Star Wars Episode V, The Empire Strikes Back, in 1980. In fact, much of the same fake snow used for this film was used for the Hoth scenes. Despite the critical success of the film, it was nominated for 2 Golden Raspberry Awards, Worst Actress for Shelley Duvall and Worst Director for Stanley Kubrick. It lost both awards. And the hedge maze is completely original to the film. It's quite interesting because you can't really picture the film without that. Alright, so that wraps this video up. Let me know what you think. Make sure you smash that like button for me. If you're still listening, it means you love the video, so do that. Set up your notifications so you know when the next video drops. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're commenting. But most of all, make sure you keep it horror.